We're going to now kick off. To kick this off properly, we have Sam Huber from Admix, who's going to talk to us about how to build a player-centric business model that's resilient enough for the next decade. So Sam, over to you.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for being here. Excited about the talk that we have today to discuss how to build a player-centric business model. So this talk really has two objectives. The first objective is to talk a little bit around the current changes in the industry. There's a lot of stuff happening, and hopefully this can help you steer the direction if you're building a game, if you're building a project, trying to kind of bring a framework on how to stay focused on the things that really matter for your players, which is always the right thing to do. And the second part, the second objective of the talk, is really telling the story of Admix and how we came up with the in-play monetization concept. Which also was basically following a player-centric goal, player-centric concept to always keep in mind what are the players interested in. Now, if you don't know what in-play is kind of the hot topic in game monetization at the moment. The idea is that we are able to push branded content, whether they are static ads or video ads within the gameplay itself, as you can see in the image here. So instead of having interstitial and rewarded videos which interrupt the game, instead of that, we have an SDK where you can dynamically insert brands within your experience, which creates additional revenue without affecting your core retention metrics. We've been going on for about 3 years, raised about $12 million so far. We have a pretty big news coming in the next couple of weeks to announce more of that. We have about 65 people, and we work with around 300 games, hundreds of advertisers. We're able to plug into different networks. We have access to our own brands as well. And they're really trying to create a new market, a new way for publishers to monetize their games without affecting the user experience, and for advertisers, mainly brands, to finally be able to target gamers. So let's get started. There is a lot of changes happening currently in the industry. I've just listed a couple of things here. By no means this is limited to that. There's a lot more to it. And this is across various topics: regulations, privacies, new ways, new infrastructure, new ways to monetize games, new type of interest from brands to finally be targeting these gamers. So lots of things happening. And the future could really go in different many ways. And that's really tricky. It's exciting, but it's also a bit overwhelming because there's so many directions, so many things happening that sometimes you just wonder, which one is it going to be? Which future are we going to see? How can I prepare for the future in such hectic time? And so the framework that I want to bring today, which is how we build Admix, but can be applied to different projects as well, is a slightly different way to look at all of this, to kind of cut off the noise and really focus on what matters, looking at the fundamentals from the perspective of the players. In other words, what do the player want? What do they want today, and what will they want tomorrow? There's a really famous talk from Jeff Bezos where he explains that it's not about trying to predict the future or trying to predict what's going to change, because that's very difficult. No one can really predict the future. However, you can look at what is not going to change, because of course things are changing every day, but there are fundamental things or behaviors that are true today and also will be true tomorrow. And that gives you a great certainty about the future. So if you're building or publishing a game today, or you're in the space, it's really about looking at what the players have wanted, want today, and will want tomorrow. Regardless of the noise, regardless of everything that is happening, you can focus on that and actually be able to deliver a great project. Now, this is not rocket science concept, of course, what I'm saying here. But actually what I found is it's often overlooked when people are making business decisions. So if we summarize what players will always want, and again, nothing rocket science here, so don't expect something groundbreaking. Players want free content. That's something that, it has been happening and is happening today and will always be happening. I'm generalizing, of course. I know there's a massive play to earn, market and in-app purchase and hundreds of billion dollars. Of course, some people are paying, absolutely. But I can't imagine a world where a player would want to pay for a game that they can have for free, or pay more if they can have it for less, right? So the idea that we can minimize the cost of the content is something that obviously is something that players will always want. Now, another thing is about great experience. Focusing on the experience, no matter the noise, no matter what's around, is always going to be a positive. And lastly, privacy, which is something that more and more users are getting tuned to their rights. A lot of people are more and more passionate about the type of information that they're sharing. So if you give them the ability to control their privacy, if you do not compromise on their privacy, this is something that is always going to be a positive. Now, this is super basic, of course, but I want to go into a little bit of detail into each of these big kind of topics here, because there's a lot of discussion around free to play, for example, and a lot of people saying, oh, you know, we have NFTs now. It's a way to own the game and to actually create a different business models. And you have subscription as well. Is advertising dying? Is it still a big thing? And if you actually look at the numbers, you can see that, yes, there's tremendous growth in all of these paid markets, hundreds of billions of dollars being spent. But at the same time, this is generally spent by a small fraction of users. If you look at the average mobile game, about 2% of users actually convert. So the vast majority is free to play. And if you couple that with the growth in gaming, where we now have about 1.6 billion monthly gamers, depending on what you count as games. But if we cast a very wide net, and this is going to grow to 3 billion in the next couple of years. And that growth is not coming from early adopters or people who are willing to spend a lot of money on games. Obviously, those guys are already playing. So if you look at an average market adoption curve or the Gartner cycle, gaming is well advanced here, right? Most people are playing games one way or another. And so the new audience that is contributing to the growth of gaming are the conservatives, the skeptics, even people who said, oh, you know, 10 years ago, they would never have imagined that they were playing games. And now they might be playing hyper casual or other type of games. And if you look at how much people spend generally across this adoption curve, the enthusiast people adopting the technology first generally spend more than the one who come later, because they are the fans, they understand it, they're happy to spend money in the latest console and paying for games and contributing, and they're basically the whales, right? They caught the game first and now they're spending more money. So as gaming is becoming bigger and bigger, for every paid user, you have 50 plus non-paying users that are joining, the conservative, the skeptics, the late adopters. So more and more, the proportion of user spending is going to decrease. That in itself, in absolute term, is going to grow. More and more people are playing games and they're paying for it, but an even bigger proportion is not. And so that's a very long way of saying that free content advertising is 100% here to stay. There are a lot of people thinking that other business models are going to replace them. That's not the case, right? The proportion of free-to-play users is there and is going to keep growing because the market is becoming more and more mainstream. And this is evidenced by many data points, one of them being this: the number of paid apps in the App Store has always kept decreasing. Yes, paid apps in absolute dollar value make more money than ever, but there's still a smaller fraction compared to the much faster growing free-to-play market. And how do you monetize free-to-play? How do you monetize free users who are not willing to spend money? Well, advertising is going to remain a key monetization driver. So now I'm sure this is not a surprise for anyone, but there's a lot of discussion around other type of business models. Is it going to overtake in-app purchases? And the way that we're seeing it, advertising actually is going to be more and more important, especially for casual and hyper casual games, as it already is, because that audience is not going to convert. So this is just, again, a long way to say that if you look at the fundamentals, there are things that are not changing. The fact that more and more people are going to be free players is something that will be here to stay, no matter the noise, no matter what's happening in the industry. So let's talk about the second topic, seamless experience. Now, when you're crafting a gaming experience, of course, every publisher, every developer is trying to create a great experience. Generally, what gets in the way, and again, this is speaking from the data, is intrusive advertising being a part of that experience and cutting that experience, creating these breaking points within the experience. There's data coming from Iron Source here showing basically the LTV, or the average revenue per user, as a function of the number of interruptions in the game. In other words, the number of impressions per user per day for, I believe that this is interstitial videos. And you can see that we basically have a peak at 8 impressions per user per day. After that, you start losing users, you affect your retention faster than the extra revenue. So very quickly in the process, after showing 8 impressions per user per day, that's your peak. This is how many ads you should serve as a maximum to maximize your revenue. Beyond that, you are not maximizing your revenue. So again, this is pretty clear that here the advertising experience is actually playing against what players actually want, which is the fact that they want a seamless experience. So if you're able to remove that, if you're able to stop those interruptions, you can't go wrong with that. This is another thing that won't change. And the goal here is to remove this peak here and try to have a line where no matter how many impressions per user per day you're serving, you can still increase your LTV for quite a while, or at least you will probably have a peak, but it will be a lot further. So it gives you more growth opportunities before you are reaching your local maximum. And this is, again, all of this is part of how we were thinking about, okay, we're bringing this new monetization solution to the table. What do we need to change? What are the key drivers that are going to make that experience seamless again? Now, the third point was around privacy. Of course, everyone, if they have the choice, if they're given a direct choice, like the ATT pop-up, people want their privacy to be respected. If you are the choice, do you want this app to know everything about me or not? People are going to say no. And on average, this is about, the data shows about 25% opt-in of that pop-up across various apps as of July, which is not surprising. Now, if you ask the question in a slightly different way, like we do in our GDPR consent pop-up, which we are providing as an add-on for our developers, now we have 75% opt-in. And that's because the question is worded in a different way. So again, if you ask in the right way, for the right reasons, people are sometimes willing to compromise. But overall, people more and more are getting privacy aware. No player would ask for more of their data to be shared or compromised. That's another thing that won't change. That's another thing that is not going to change and that you can make sure to implement in your next project. So that brings us to kind of the thought process of what players actually want. Very basic, very foundational topics that you can then build on top of. And this is precisely what we have done. So you've seen this video now before my talk started, so I won't start it again. But the idea of In Play is that we are the ultimate business, player-centric business model. And that's something that ticks all the boxes that we've talked about before. It's made to monetize free-to-play games. Free-to-play games are going to be more and more important. It doesn't interrupt the user experience. It's infinitely scalable because it doesn't create those interruptions inside the game. It doesn't affect the retention, and your curve of LTV keeps increasing. And lastly, it doesn't compromise personal data. Most of the data that we use is contextual to the game. It's not about who you are in the real world. It's not about the purchases that you make. It's not about that. It's about understanding the type of environment and how you are interacting with it. Now, the best part of that is that it is a tool. And I often say that this is one of the first tools for monetization. It's not just a plug and play solution that you slap on top of your existing game. You can actually decide how it's going to look, craft your own experience as part of it. I'm just showing you a quick extract here that shows in a fast forwarded way the SDK. You have your ad units. You can place it within the game. You can create these digital estates inside your environment and then monetize all these different spots without affecting the user experience. So it's 100% player-centric because the setup of it is done by the publisher. And the publisher, by default, or the developer at least, they're trying to create the best experience. And that's why by aligning the two interests, you can make sure that this model is absolutely player-centric. And this is the proof. I wanted to take you through a couple of examples that this is actually working. And also, why does it matter so much now to focus on these things that are always going to be true, focusing on the fundamentals, focusing on what won't change? Well, if you're thinking that the amount of free-to-play users is growing, then of course you are monetizing their time inside the game. So the longer they stay in the game, the more valuable they are. The longer you can remain a seamless experience, the more you're going to be able to monetize them. And this is precisely what in-play is all about, by not creating those interruptions. So an example here with the studio Neon Play is they've run different scenarios with a control scenario, 5 placement in the game, 10 placement in the game, and you can see that the retention is not changing. So we here have a solution that is so player-centric that users do not leave, and therefore that curve, LTV curve, keeps going up instead of coming down after a maximum, which means it's monetization without compromising on the user experience. A couple of others examples here showing an increase in lifetime value, because these are 3D worlds or different type of games. You can stack various placement inside the game. Every time someone sees the placement, they don't need to click on it. It's all passive at the moment. That creates extra revenue, incremental revenue, without affecting the existing interstitial or rewarded strategy that can still be part of the game. This is purely incremental, so therefore no risk for the developer. Other examples as well regarding privacy. We've been able to fast track quite a lot of integration at the beginning of the year because of the upcoming iOS 14 change. This was back in Q1, Q2. A lot of publishers were not quite sure how their main business models were going to be affected. Is the CPM going to go down? Is performance spend going down to zero? What's going to happen? Let's mitigate that with a new revenue stream that doesn't rely on the IDFA as much, because it's mainly driven by contextual advertising and brand spend to mitigate that. And those two studios have therefore mitigated or diversified their revenue stream by using an in-play solution like Admix. And the last one that I wanted to show, this is a really exciting one, is really to show that because we're a tool and not just a plug and play solution, it works everywhere. Initially, we targeted genre like sports and 3D environments and city-driven storylines and stuff like that. But very quickly, we had other publishers trying us in different type of games, like puzzle games, which at first thought is not the maybe the more logical way to place those type of placements. But because the publishers are extremely creative, they can actually come with really, really cool activations in genre that we didn't even expect would work. And that's the beauty of being a tool and being publisher driven. As long as it maintains a player-centric experience, you can use it anywhere you want. So to close off, I think I'm almost done with my time allocation here. This was to show that there's a lot of things changing in the market. You can always try to keep focusing on the fundamentals, cut off the noise. What do the player actually want? And there are 3 main things that we've identified here. And the same thought process was what we applied when we came up with the concept of in-play. So you can apply it at different levels: game design, distribution, monetization. And we believe that in-play ticks all the different boxes that we talked about and is a new player-centric business model that could help you generate significant increased revenue. And that's the idea. You focus on player behavior that won't change, and you can ensure that you have a business model that is going to be resilient for the next decade, or at least for more years as you are trying to navigate a very fast changing market. Thank you so much, everyone. If you want to know more about InPlay, please reach me out any way you want.
Great, thank you, Sam. We've got loads of questions for you. So let's kick off straight away. Do you think that AI that's used to understand information is not personal enough? Does it sometimes detach the developers from the players too much? Is that something you kind of have a view on?
AI in terms of serving the ad to the right player, or?
I'm just quoting the question. So I think what they probably mean that. It's hard. I can't interpret for you, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, we use different signals inside the game. Of course, it's very important for advertisers that their advert is seen by the right person. It needs to work not only for the developers, but for the advertisers as well. It's a full ecosystem. So we use various data points, and we are starting to use different layers of machine learning and AI to make that matching even better. But you can still do that using information that you capture inside the game, more about the gameplay itself, rather than the personal data of the actual player.
Exactly. I think the use of personal data is the question mark here, and obviously with the IDFA, and also with the now coming into force the AADC. So that's the I can forget what the AADC stands for, but it's the children's code, the appropriate age appropriate design. That's it. Yeah. So I think that's going to be an important part of the things moving forward. So smarter use of data is perfectly good, provided you do it with insight. I know traditionally you looked at VR experiences with Admix. So the question here is, are you still doing that, or are you broader than that now?
Yeah, we did start by focusing on VR, trying to build a new business model for immersive experiences where traditional advertising just doesn't have a space. But very quickly, we had adoption from mobile because we work with Unity, we work with other game engines that are cross-platform, and the market being so much bigger, we VR now is a fraction of our revenue, very small fraction of our revenue. But it's a market that we're very passionate about. We're looking a lot at the metaverse, everything happening in virtual world, and that's really where we want to play. We want to be the monetization layer of the immersive internet that includes gaming front and center, but also virtual worlds, VR and AR as this market develops.
The next question is from Joe Plong, and they're saying, is InPlay, or Admix in general, really a new business model, or just a new way to leverage ads for monetization, framed differently? How does InPlay change the fundamentals of doing business for developers and publishers?
Well, at the core, we are getting money from brands, advertisers, and passing a commission, pretty big commission, back to the publishers. So in a sense, it is a business model that existed before, but I believe that because it doesn't affect your core retention metrics, and it is truly player-centric, that is the biggest innovation here. This is the first time where you can monetize without compromise by adding more spaces inside your virtual environment and make money from the inside of your games without affecting the user experience, as long as you are obviously doing, not covering the whole thing with ads, of course. But it gives you a lot more flexibility. It is a true monetization tool, a developer tool that you can really become part of the creative process. It's not a layer that you put at the end. It is truly part of the creative process. I think because of that, it is truly transformational, and we can start to we start to see that in the data as well.
And I think it's interesting because it is a very old model. I think the first in-world ad was Chupa Chups, the lollipops. I can't remember what year that was, but I'm going to guess at 1992, something like that.
Advertising in games has been almost as old as gaming itself. We've seen some product placement with Nintendo. I guess what we bring to the table is the technology. So it's all scalable. You install one SDK, drag and drop, and then that connects you directly with various sources of advertisers, whether they're direct. You have the ability to approve which advertiser comes into your game down to the creative level to give maximum creativity and maximum control to the publisher. So we're building tools around all of that to make it as seamless as it is to monetize a website. Where you just put a tag, and it works, and you get paid monthly. That's really where we want to get down to. And it's not just advertising as well.
And the use of pre-existing kind of brand inventory. Well, I shouldn't call it inventory because the language of inventory means different things to the advertiser versus the publisher. But anyway, so the advert material pre-exists. Placing that inside a game in a smart way makes that process a lot smoother, which hopefully makes it a lot easier for the branding, the advertisers themselves to be able to unlock. One of the things that's traditionally held back this model, in my opinion, has been a difficulty in converting the ad buyers to use this process. Has that significantly changed?
It has for two reasons. So the first reason is about technology, is about making it simple for the advertisers to buy. If they have to come into a new platform, if they have to create specific in-game assets, this is just friction that they're just not willing to do, right? They're very busy people, the agencies, they work with dozens of channels, TV, Facebook, and Google. And so for them to add all this overhead, all this complexity to target a new channel is difficult. So the first thing we did was, let's make it as standard as possible. Plug into the platform that they're already using to do media buying in other platforms and make gaming as part of that. That's our first step. That's our way in. So we support existing formats. The brands do not need to create anything new. They can buy programmatically or directly from platforms that they already use. So no need to sign up with Admix. We just make Admix available to them through platforms like the Trade Desk or Google, for example. That's the first step. But the biggest step is around gaming becoming part of the culture. Gaming, you and I know that gaming has been big for decades, but only in the perception of advertisers and brands, this is really only exploding now. And COVID has been a massive catalyst to that, where, Roblox and Fortnite are always in the press. It's like the new TV, it's part of the culture. Everyone plays. And because of that, brands finally woke up to the fact that there's a huge audience there, 2 billion people almost every day, that they can reach in different ways. So that change in mindset means that now there is demand for them to actually invest into in-game advertising, which wasn't the case even 3 years ago. So the combination of the two things is really the rocket ship that we're talking about.
I agree. Of course, I was talking Campaign, the advertising magazine from Haymarket, had an event last week on mobile gaming. I was talking on that panel. I was like Dave from Pocket Game Wars as well. And it's kind of ironic that now the point where brand and advertising are starting to understand the value of games, when privacy is coming in, it's going to make it more difficult than it would have been had they done it a few years ago. But actually, I think it's a good thing. It means that we're moving forward into a space where we have to be a bit more sensitive to people's privacy. Sam, I'm afraid I'm out of time. Thank you very much for that. And we're going to move on to the next speaker. So thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, everyone.
Great stuff. So obviously, I think in-game ads is something I've been quite passionate about for a while. There are a number of teams out there who are looking at this. It's something that hasn't quite worked yet in the mass scale that it could, but I think will happen. And as part of the many mixes of the way you think about monetization for games, I think it's an important thing to play with.